You're listening to The Phillip Jordan Show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Show. I am your host, Phillip Jordan, for Last Word on College Football and 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama. I got a fun show playing for you guys today. Very big guest on the podcast this week. I am going to be joined by Matt Moscona. He is the host of After Further Review from 3 to 6 Central over on 104.5 FM ESPN in Baton Rouge, also the program director there. So we will be recapping and talking all things LSU football, looking at the LSU Spring Game, the difference Brian Kelly has made in the program. We'll talk Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier. We will talk Harold Perkins. We'll talk a lot LSU and some other college football stuff with Matt here on the show. And also, I will talk about the Alabama Spring Game, just a few moments there, what I thought about that, some things I took away from it, some questions I still have, the college football rule changes. So a lot of cool stuff here on the Phillip Jordan Show today. You can check out the Phillip Jordan Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I'll read it on a future edition of the show. And if you just leave 4 stars, you're just a straight up hater. You can also check out the show over on my YouTube channel, the Phillip Jordan Media YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on a video, and I'll read it on a future edition of the show. You can follow me on social media at pjordanscc, or you can email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. All right, and before we get to Matt, like I said, I want to talk about the Alabama Spring Game, which they had on Saturday as well. Only 2 SEC Spring Games. It's the last 2. Alabama and LSU finished up the Spring Game season, I guess you would say, for the SEC. And speaking of that little spot I always play where you can find the show, I probably need to re-record that. That's back a few weeks ago when the voice was not cooperating correctly, but I probably need to re-record that maybe later on down the road, maybe next week. It'll be a new version of that. But Alabama Spring Game. So we had Tony Sakalas, from Tide Illustrated on the show last week, previewing the Spring Game, and a lot of talk going into this was the quarterbacks. Tommy Rees, new offensive coordinator, replacing Bryce Young. Would anybody step up and take the reins in the spring? I'm going to tell you, we got more questions than answers, I think, with the quarterback situation in Alabama right now. Coming out of it, I was kind of hoping to see one of the two really put that stamp on the job and say, hey, I'm the guy. I'm going to end up being the quarterback here at Alabama. But it does not seem to be the case. Both quarterbacks, they did some good things. It wasn't like they struggled the entire time. And there were some nice throws made by both quarterbacks. Ty Simpson was 12 of 26, 0 touchdowns. He did rush for 58 yards. He threw an interception. And then Jalen Milroe had 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, but he was 19 of 37 and threw 2 interceptions. Well, now I will say that 1 interception was kind of like a Hail Mary situation, just throwing it up toward the end of the first half of the Alabama's 8A game, and he got picked off. So maybe not so much there, but there were some decision making. There were some inconsistencies between both these quarterbacks, and obviously neither one of them stood out. Now I will say this: I didn't know Ty Simpson was the mobile quarterback he was. Now I know he was a dual threat coming out of high school, but as anybody who's been listening to me a long time, I'm not the biggest. Not say I don't follow recruiting. I'm just not a big recruiting guy. I don't talk recruiting a lot. That's not my lane. I talk about what's in front of me, the games, so forth. But like I said, they both did impressive things, but at the same time, you can see struggle. This thing is far from settled. Like I said, there feels like there's more questions with this quarterback battle than there are answers. The receivers, to me, no one really stood out. And that was another thing with this team, with the Alabama going into the spring game. I really wanted to see one of these receivers stand out. Who's going to be the guy? Now, look, it's the spring game. And kind of like I said way back when everybody was freaking out over Arch Manning not playing well in the Texas Spring Game. You know, you have to temper expectations in these things. Very vanilla, not showing a lot. So you really don't know what you're getting when you watch these spring games. The coaches are seeing and doing a lot more in the practices and the scrimmages we don't see. So you also got to take that consideration. But what I saw, I didn't see any receivers really stepping up, and that was a problem in Alabama last season. Bryce Young did not have that go-to guy. I felt like Jahmyr Gibbs was the best receiver for Alabama, but that was your running back. Now, speaking of running back, now Nick Saban has talked about in previous press conferences after these scrimmages, talking about running back is not an issue for this team, and they've got a good one. Freshman Justice Hayes. I mean, he does not look like a freshman. I thought, man, that's a senior. Just the build, he looks the part. He looks the part of an Alabama running back. Very impressive. Did some things out of backfield, 2 touchdowns. Now this is a loaded running back room for Alabama, so we'll see how he fits in. But on Saturday during the spring game, I was really impressed with him. Defensively, we didn't get to see Dallas Turner. He did not play in the Alabama spring game, but Malachi Moore was really good, making that transition from safety all the way over to cornerback. So that's a tough deal. He had a really good game with 9 tackles and 3 sacks in the game. So, and that's something to look out for. I feel like Alabama's defense is going to head in the forward direction. With Kevin Steele being there as defensive coordinator, I just don't know. Just unsure what they're going to be able to do on the offense side of the ball. So, look, we got a long way till the season starts, and Nick Saban, I'm sure we'll figure this out, and the staff will figure this out. But just from what I saw during the spring, I was not overly impressed by any of the quarterbacks, and they're going to get that straightened out if they're going to win the SEC West, because guess we got coming up a little bit. Can we talk about a team? Right now, I'm favoring to win the SEC West. Now, real quickly, before we get into this week's guest, I want to talk about some rule changes in college football, which is no surprise to anybody out there that this went through. And that is, of course, dealing with the clock. And college football rule changes, and clock will not stop after first downs unless it is the final 2 minutes of the half. No consecutive timeouts by team. Foul at end of first or third quarter will carry over. So let's look at those last two first. No consecutive timeouts. Basically, the only time I really felt this is an issue is freezing the kicker. You just won't call back-to-back timeouts in that situation. And then foul at end of first or third quarter. Basically, what would normally be an untimed down, they would just carry over to the second or fourth quarter. So no issue there. I'm all for clock not stopping at the first downs unless it is the final 2 minutes of the half. I feel like the game flows better. It's got a better pace this way. It'll be interesting to see is there any changes in philosophies, how coaches deal with this, because like I said, when you get a first down, clock's going to be moving. And so now you're going to have to be, if you're not in that 2 minutes, say you're in the last 5 minutes of the game and you're trying to get down the field real quickly, make a score, get yourself back in the game, you're going to have to be on your players more now. Hey, get out of bounds to stop the clock. Not, hey, we get a first down, we can get up there real quick, run the next play or spike it or whatever is stopped. No, you're going to have to get out of bounds to stop that unless it's in the final 2 minutes. So that's going to be a big part too on how they handle this. So it's going to be interesting. I'm all for it. Like I said, I think it's better. I know this NFL rule, and there's a lot of people that don't like it. They don't want to be like the NFL. College football fans don't. And just because you're going by this doesn't mean you're becoming the NFL. But I do think it's a better way of going about things. Now, I know when these rules are, especially that one, got first introduced, it was like player safety, less plays. Yeah, I think this is more TV related than it is that. Now, it's nice to say that safety thing, player safety. I think we all know this is more for the TV folks, kind of make sure these games are over with at a certain time so the next game is ready to come on. There's no overlap, but we'll that's kind of where I'm looking at that. But hey, what you guys think? Y'all can hit me up down in the comment section or leave me a review on Apple Podcasts and what you think about all of this. All right, guys, I'm going to play a quick little advertisement for one of the other podcasts I do. Then after that, I will be joined by Matt Moscona. If you enjoy this podcast and live in the southeast area of Alabama, check out the Wiregrass High School Football Report brought to you by DGO Strategies. During high school football season, I talk with local coaches and look at the biggest stories and games. The show will be returning soon, and you can check it out on Apple Podcasts, the Phillip Jordan Media YouTube channel, or 969thelegend.com. Now, back to the Phillip Jordan Show. Everybody joining me on the show this week. Really excited to have this guy on, Matt Moscona. He is the host of the After Further Review show from 3 to 6 on 104.5 FM ESPN in Baton Rouge. Also program director there too as well. And Matt, I appreciate you coming on. Excited to talk some LSU football with you.
Hey, Phillip, it's my pleasure, man. Thanks for the invite.
Oh yeah, definitely. This was one of the spring games too I was looking forward to the most. With LSU though, just kind of like looking back at the past year with Brian Kelly, what's the big difference? With the excitement, when you look at last year, his first spring, and now you look at now, like where the LSU program is at.
Yeah. The difference is a year ago, it was just frenetic. Remember, Brian Kelly inherited a program that played in the Texas Bowl with 39 available scholarship players. Right, their total scholarship number was somewhere in the low 50s. So when he came in, he immediately had to rebuild the roster. He attacked the transfer portal, had to replace the entire coaching staff. And a year ago, they were literally working on things like discipline and how to practice. Brian Kelly he told us he had these little cards that like accountability cards that every player would fill out each day. Like, did you sleep enough? Did you eat properly? Did you work out? And it was changing culture. I know that's sort of a cliche that people use often, but he had a lot of work to do a year ago. This year, it just felt much more settled. It was almost refreshingly quiet, if that makes sense. They've got everybody back on their offense. They've supplemented nicely on a defense that returns a bunch of production as well. And I think that this is a team that is worthy of all the preseason hype they're getting. It's just a matter of, can they stay healthy and can they execute upon it?
Yeah, and he's just, looking at last season, 2022, just shows to me how good of coach Brian Kelly is. I mean, he comes in and I think sometimes SEC fans looked at that higher and said, oh, the Notre Dame coach. I'm like, he did some great things at Notre Dame. I know last year in the summer, I put out some SEC coach rankings on Twitter. I put him third behind Nick Saban and Kirby. And I got so much pushback on that. And it's going to be the same stuff. I mean, he swapped Kirby and Nick on that list, but just what he was able to do last year too. And then now the expectations are now, okay, you won 10 games, you went to the SEC championship, and now going into the spring, I mean, just huge expectations there now too. Like they should at LSU. That should always be that way.
That should always be the expectation, right? But whenever you have the 500-pound gorilla in your division with Alabama, that's always kind of the question is, can you clear that hurdle? And I think the fact that LSU was able to beat Alabama year one under Brian Kelly has given a lot of people around here this feeling that gap maybe doesn't exist like it did. And look, I think we can talk about it. I think Alabama's got their own questions this spring and then into the fall that they got to answer, maybe for the first time legitimately under Nick Saban. But, the thing about this LSU team is they have enough talent to win any game on their schedule. If some programs, some teams go into a season where the expectation is, you're climbing that ladder. Like for Tennessee this year, for example, you had your breakout season last year. Now, can you build upon it? Can you prove that wasn't a one-off fluke? For LSU, it's legitimately a question of, when you go to Tuscaloosa, can you win it? Can you avoid stubbing your toe like you did last year at A&M? And if you do those things, you're a playoff team this year. And this team is is talented enough and deep enough and experienced enough to be that. It's just really a matter of can they go execute week in and week out over the course of a season.
Yeah, well, what was interesting before the A&M game, I remember there was conversations about, hey, what if LSU won out, beat Georgia in Atlanta? Could they get in the playoffs? So, I mean, that's a great first year. Now, the spring game on Saturday ended a 32-32 tie. I think all coaches would prefer that if these spring games end in a tie. I know Auburn's did too as well. That's the team I covered over at Last Word. So I think these coaches get happy. Okay, a tie. That's how I want it. But what was your big takeaways from the spring game?
I think coaches would probably prefer not to have a spring game, but I
know that too.
I do understand. Look, in the age of the SEC network, and you've got to have content, and I get it. I get why they are what they are, but mostly the biggest takeaway is LSU came out healthy. Mm-hmm. The worst thing in the world that could have happened for this team is you'd have a key player go down. Before the 2018 season, Grant Delpit broke his collarbone in the spring game. Now he came back for the season, had an All-America year. He was fantastic, but it's just the last thing in the world you want to see. So they were healthy. Brian Kelly even told us before the spring game, he said, what you should notice is that our offense should look like one of the best offenses in the country, and you should notice the newcomers on defense. And by and large, that played out. Phil, LSU returned 6 of their top 7 offensive linemen. They returned a 5th-year starting quarterback. They returned literally all of their running backs. Even though we didn't see some of them in the spring game, Mason Taylor's back at tight end, although he didn't practice this spring. You lose Kayshon Boutte and Jere Jenkins at receiver, but I would argue that receiver is LSU's deepest spot on the team. You just saw what you expected to see, which was an offense that had playmakers and was deep and talented. Kyron Lacey's probably the big breakout star of spring. Not many people know that name. He transferred in last year. Kind of got lost in the fold amid a really talented receiver room. But if you're looking at the highlights, he's the guy who made the one-handed catch in the spring over the middle and then housed it for about 70 yards. He's a super talented guy, just waiting his turn, and we'll probably get that turn. Defensively, there's a lot of new names and new faces that LSU's bringing to be in the portal. But one guy worth mentioning is LaTerrence Wells. She's the only cornerback that returned from a year ago. So he's entering his sophomore season, and he's a kid from Lafayette who they're very high on, and he could be maybe the next Louisiana kid to be the great defensive back out of LSU.
When I watched the game on Saturday, Jaden Daniels looked like a different quarterback to a certain degree because, just the pocket presence and pushing the ball downfield, which Brian Kelly said something about that on the ESPN telecast before the game, that he would like to see him push the ball downfield. Did you see growth in Jaden Daniels from what was toward the end of last season in the spring?
I don't know necessarily from the end of the season to the spring, but I'll tell you where we did see that growth. And that was after LSU lost to Tennessee last year. And there was a very key moment that anybody who follows LSU will remember this, but LSU had man coverage on the outside, and Jaden Daniels didn't throw it up. It's one of those things where you say, man, throw it up, let your guy make a play, maybe try to draw a flag. And Daniels decided not to throw the ball. He comes over to the sideline. He just threw it away. He comes over to the sideline, and Brian Kelly reamed him. Like in a very colorful manner, said, throw the ball. And after that, we saw Jaden start to open up more. We saw him take chances. We saw him really the Florida game. He threw a very similar route in man coverage on the outside with Jere Jenkins. And he put it up there. He underthrew the ball intentionally, and Jere came back to it, made a play, and scored. I think that's when we saw the development for Jaden. And now the question is, as a fifth-year guy with second year in this offense, with the coaches with a lot of the same talent, is he ready to be an All-America caliber quarterback? And I don't know the answer to that. We're all going to wait and see. But he'll have all the tools and pieces around him to do that. And, he's going to be the key to LSU getting where they want to go this year, from being just a good team that maybe wins 9 or 10 games to a team that, potentially could make the playoff and battle for a national championship. He's the guy that needs to have the 3,000-yard passing season, the 800-yard rushing season, account for 30 touchdowns. And if he does that, LSU should be in the mix there at the end.
So his backup, Garrett Nussmeier, which I think after last season, there's a lot of, I think online people wanted to make a quarterback controversy. I just, me watching, I didn't feel it. Jaden Daniels really good. Why would you why would he not be the quarterback going into 2023? He had a solid day in the spring game too. Hit a 51-yard pass to Brian Thomas and a 7-yard touchdown pass to him. What do you see, what you're hearing and what you've seen, what his role with this team?
Well, Brian Kelly's been very clear that there is no controversy that Jaden Daniels is the starter. What he has said, though, is when you have two guys that are really talented, you can't be closed-minded. And so you've got to give Garrett opportunities to compete, which they've done. Look, in the bowl game, they gave Garrett Nussmeier every third series. So, my read on that is I think Brian Kelly recognizes the situation he's in. You've got Jaden Daniels, who's your starter. You've got Garrett Nussmeier. Then after that, with Walker Howard having left for Ole Miss, your only other quarterback is true freshman Ricky Collins. Like, you can't afford to have Garrett Nussmeier pull the escape hatch right now in this transfer portal window. Because if you do, then you're a turned ankle away from leaning on a true freshman. So I think to some degree, Brian Kelly is certainly being genuine when he looks at Garrett Nussmeier and says, we like that player. And they do. He's a talented kid. He can make all the throws, son of a coach, everything everybody knows. Mm-hmm. The other part of it, too, though, is I think you do have to pacify Garrett Nussmeier a little bit here, because you can ill afford to have him leave, because if he does, that could turn your season on its head. So, and then really how you recruit that position moving forward as well. So I think there's a little bit of both going on there. I think they feel like they got to keep Garrett Nussmeier happy, but also recognizing Jaden Daniels is this team's best chance to win a championship.
Yeah, that's just kind of like just a great example of where you're at in college football right now with quarterbacks. Because, like you said, he's talented, deserves to play, be on the field when you can get him out there. But at the same time, you got to make them happy, because then, like you said, that transfer portal is always like dangling there. So that's a very complex thing for coaches now when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, look at what Nick Saban said this weekend after the Alabama spring game. I mean, could Alabama be looking into the transfer portal? It's you can't ignore it. You got to recognize that the portal giveth and the portal taketh away, and you just have to acknowledge that it's not going anywhere. So you have to use it as a tool, as your strength, instead of as something that's going to limit or paralyze your growth. So through 2 years, Brian Kelly's done that. Not necessarily a quarterback, but he remade his secondary 2 years in a row with the transfer portal. Some of the key contributors, Jaden Daniels, look at what they've done. So they did do it via quarterback via the portal. On the offensive line as well. They've defensive line this year. They went out at 4 defensive tackles. I mean, you have to be willing to acknowledge it's just what it is, and so use it to your advantage instead of letting it be used to your detriment.
You talked about the defense a little bit, but I want Harold Perkins. And that's always nice to have a guy like that. I mean, it's going to put fear in every quarterback they go up against. But they had him more on the inside in the spring game versus off the edge as an edge rusher. What did you make of his performance there and how he's adjusted to that role?
Oh yeah, he's a Mike linebacker. A year ago he burst on the scene, but it was one of those things where you bring in a Harold Perkins and you realize, okay, he's not ready to make calls and be your every down inside linebacker. And they had a couple of really good veteran players there already. Micah Baskerville was fantastic. But you got to get him on the field. Like, you can't let a guy that talented just sit on the sideline and rot. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I give a ton of credit to defensive coordinator Matt House, because a year ago he found a way to get Harold Perkins engaged. And you can say, well, that's not that hard. Just put the athletic guy on the edge and rush the passer. Well, the problem with that is that's the jack spot where B.J. Ojolari played. B.J. Ojolari is LSU's best player last year. Mm-hmm. So they had to get real creative to find a way to get both those guys on the field at the same time, and they did that. But make no mistake, Harold Perkins is more Devin White than he is B.J. Ojolari. And I'm not sitting here trying to tell you he's going to win the Butkus and be the 5th overall pick. Is he capable? Sure. But I'm not putting that expectation on him. What I'm telling you is they see him as an athletic inside backer that can put his nose in the line of scrimmage and make 100 tackles, who can also run sideline to sideline, who can shoot gaps and bust up plays and be a double-digit sack guy, a 3-down linebacker. But the other thing that's really interesting about Perkins is the coaching staff has been pretty clear. There are going to be 3rd down situations where they put him back on the edge at that jack spot. and when you're that versatile and you're that talented, why not? Why not use him in every way possible? But he's not just going to be a third down edge rush specialist this year. He's going to be your every down inside linebacker, and they're hoping for big things for him this year.
Yeah, poor Noah Cain on Saturday in the spring game. He had the job of blocking him a lot of times as the running back, and he did well. He did well at times, but there was a couple times where obviously Harold Perkins got the better of him.
Harold Perkins is special, but Noah Cain's a good story too. A guy who was a highly touted guy from Baton Rouge who went to IMG Academy, started his career at Penn State, and battled some injury issues, but had a nice season last year. And I'm sure they're expecting more out of him this year too.
I know you mentioned the secondary. Of course, they went to the portal, got a couple of guys out of there. Just what's your read on the secondary? I know you alluded to them a little bit earlier, but just kind of what's your read on where they're at going into the season?
So we didn't even see some of the guys who might end up being starters. Deuce Chestnut is a transfer in from Syracuse, who was all conference last year in the ACC. He sat out this spring with injury. I think they replaced basically everyone in the secondary. The only guys that are back that were key contributors were Greg Brooks, who was an Arkansas transfer who played nickel. You got Major Burns back at safety as well. But everybody else they're replacing from a year ago. Your top three corners, your top two safeties. I mean, you're replacing a ton. Mm-hmm. But last year, the secondary was one of those spots where they kind of had to bubble gum and duct tape it together. And it did not look anything like an LSU secondary where they've got the reputation of DBU and all that stuff. They did a nice job being respectable. This is one of those years where even though you replaced darn near everybody, you are undoubtedly more talented in your secondary than you were a year ago. The big question is when you have to replace so many guys, can that unit come together as one? But they got options, and this should be a secondary that looks way more like what you expect to see when you look at an LSU secondary. They brought in J.K. Johnson, a transfer from Ohio State. Zy Alexander was a two-time FCS All-American at Southeastern Louisiana. He's one of those big, long, like 6'3" corners, looks like a pterodactyl, They address safety as well. That secondary is going to be really talented, man. It's just a matter of who wins what jobs and can they communicate and play well together as a team.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the more for me, just as a fan, looking forward to seeing them how that comes together. Because look, week one, you got Florida State who's going to look to throw it with Jordan Travis, which I'm already. I mean, as soon as spring's over, I'm always okay. Let's get to that. Let's get to that Sunday night game. But I'll let you go. Obviously, we kind of knew this was coming with the rule changes with college football. But with the clock, mostly the one with the clock not stopping at the first downs until 2 minutes left in the half. Where are you on that rule change? I'll be honest, I'm for it. I'm okay with it. I'm happy with it. But where are you on that?
I love it. Hey man, as SEC fans, we've seen too many 4-hour CBS games. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, look, the NFL has this thing down to a science where, we're in the central time zone. You have a noon kickoff. That game's done by 3:15. Mm-hmm. They know how to time out their game. Their schedules are break. And you might say, well, we don't want to look like the NFL. Your product doesn't need to be the NFL, but fan enjoyment and viewership, all of that matters. So yes, it's not so much even just shaving 20 minutes off of a game. It's like what we're seeing in baseball right now. It's just a pace of play type thing. Mm-hmm. With respect to stopping the clock at the first down, college football's rules were in place for as long as they were to try to inject more offense into the game. In an era when you had the triple option and the wing tee and the split back veer and, like the wishbone, and they ran the ball all the time, it was basically like a running clock. I mean, you had to find ways to inject more offense into the game. So that's why the clock rules were what they were. You stop the clock after the first down. They were trying to get more offense. Well, Phillip, I mean, we live in a day and age where they're on 90 plays, man. I mean, it's snap the ball with 20 seconds left on the clock. Like, they don't need to artificially inject more offense into the game. You have enough offense in the game. So I don't think we're going to be robbed of plays or it's going to affect the product or anything. I think you don't need it. Like, you're still going to see offensive football. You're still going to see a ton of plays. You're just going to see something that moves with a little more pace. And you probably see the end of 4-hour football games, which I think is a good thing, which we could all agree.
Yeah, I'm with you on that because I'm kind of like a person too. Like when especially maybe if I flip over to the ESPN or any channel, and the game I'm wanting to watch is supposed to start at a certain time, but it's not because the game before runs a little long. Now, if it's overtime, that's different. You just can't help that. But it's kind of one of them things. And then you got to go to the ESPN app, and then you got to search and try to find, and then, it's just part of the deal. But so yeah, I'm for it. I'm glad you said that. It's not about shortening games because it's why you want to shorten. It's the flow, like you said, the pace of the game will feel a lot faster. And you're right. Well, luckily, even with CBS, we only got one more year of that anyways. But Matt, this has been fun. I told you 20 minutes, so we're about to hit the 20-minute mark right now. But if the listeners, viewers want to follow along, where they can find you, where can they check out after further review if they're not in the New Orleans area?
Yeah, I'm on statewide in Louisiana, ESPN Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Alexandria. We stream live on YouTube every day as well. And I always tell people, man, if you can spell my last name, you can find me on the internet, man. I'm on every platform all over the place. So I'd appreciate anybody tuning in.
As everybody go check out Matt. And Matt, I appreciate the time, and I hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
My pleasure.
Let me tell you about my new podcast, the Spring Football Report. If you're a fan of the XFL, the USFL, Spring Football, this is the show for you. Every Wednesday, I will break down the latest games in spring football, XFL, USFL, maybe CFL down the road, and give my thoughts on the big matchup, big news in the spring football leagues. Also be joined by guests, maybe players, coaches, people who cover these teams. The fun show, 30 to 40 minutes every single Wednesday. You can check out the Spring Football Report on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. And I hope you would check it out. And it's a fun show. Now back to the Phillip Jordan Show. All right, and guys, go check out Matt. Find him online. Great LSU content, just college football, college, sports, all good stuff there. So go check them out. You will not regret it if you haven't already, which I know a lot of you have. So as we get out of here, and I'm trying to do better on keeping this show 30 to 40 minutes. All my podcasts do try to kind of keep in that 30 to 40-minute range. So one more thing. On Monday, Pat Forty put out a column that the SEC is kind of looking at some ideas to deter fans from storming the field after a big win. The great example was when Tennessee beat Alabama this past year, and LSU had had a game where they did it too as well, and there was other situations also. So this is not official, but this is just something Pat Forty put out there over at Sports Illustrated. The SEC teams could lose a home game for storming the field. An example he gave would be this year, this upcoming season. Say Auburn was to upset Georgia, and then they stormed the field. So then Auburn would have to go to Athens the next time Auburn is due to play at home against Georgia. So, and in his column, his piece there at Sports Illustrated, you saw there that if you read it, that means 3 straight years Auburn would have to go to Athens. Do I think this is going to happen? I don't. I don't see enough people agreeing with this. But it also said in there that Greg Sankey has been looking at a way to deter or find a way to prevent it from happening. I think it's fun. I think it's great. I think Nick Saban has complained, and then Greg Sankey's like, okay, when we get Saban off my back, let me look at this. Let me figure something out, because Nick Saban has complained since that Tennessee game when Tennessee stormed the field. But there's some stuff that did happen there. You know about it. You follow that situation. But yeah, I'm not for that. I'm like, leave it alone. Let's not do that. We find different ways. Maybe I will admit it happens too much. Like, okay, I get it if you haven't beat a team in a while, like Tennessee, Alabama. I got that. Or if you beat the number one team in the country, or stuff like that. But sometimes teams, I'll just be looking to storm the field. I'm like, Was that really a big enough win to do that? You look at it that way. Okay, maybe it doesn't warrant the storming of the field, which it was funny last year when when all that was going on, and then they were criticizing Clemson. And I'm doing this off my head. I cannot remember who Clemson beat, but they were home and they stormed the field. And they said, "Why are they storming the field? They're ranked higher than that team," or blah 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 blah. And then it's like, dude, you don't realize that they do that at every Clemson home game. They meet at the Paul. So that was just something just popped in my head, thinking about the storming the field thing. But we'll see. We'll see what SEC does. I don't think that's going to be it. Be interested to see anybody ask Commissioner Sankey this at media days this summer. But that's kind of where we sit on that. So, and that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Phillip Jordan Show. I think we're just going to go once a week from here on out until we get to the season. Then I will go to a weekend like I did last year. Tuesday, Thursday will kind of be the deal there. But I think since spring ball is out of the way now, we can go one of these a week. Try to drop these on Tuesday mornings like I've been doing. But please also, Wiregrass High School Football Report, the high school football podcast I do, it is coming back very soon. I'm actually planning on trying to get that thing going back up in May. Start talking to some coaches and other people involved with high school football in the Wiregrass. It's not as far away as you think it is. It's getting closer. So I'll be doing that. I just launched a brand new podcast. The first episode came out Saturday, but the regular schedule will be Wednesdays for the Spring Football Report. So if you are one that watches the XFL, which is they're in the playoffs now, or the USFL, a podcast is once a week, 30, 40 minutes talking about that. And I'll have a guest on Wednesday's show for that one. I'm still debating if I should do the CFL, because with my high school and college football stuff, I do writing and podcasting. I don't know if I can give the CFL the time when it comes to the spring football stuff. We'll see. But for sure, I got you covered through these last 2 weeks of the XFL with the playoffs, and then, of course, through the USFL season as well. Well, I'm going to get out of here. I hope everybody has a great week. Go check out those other shows I do. They're all on Apple Podcasts. But I hope everybody has a great week. As always, let kindness be your compass. And you've been watching and listening to the Phillip Jordan Show.
Thanks for listening to the Phillip Jordan Show. Subscribe to the audio podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can watch the show over at the Phillip Jordan Media YouTube channel. Got a question or topic idea? Email the show at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. Join us next time for more great football talk.